We're now on our third review session, which is on the theories of democratic government. That includes who has power. So we first need to begin by defining power. Power is the ability to get someone else to act with your intentions. There is power in all relationships. It can be big action or little action that can be an example of power, but it does need to have some type of an action. The next is authority. Authority is the legal right to use power. Most people are willing to accept decisions if they believe those decisions have been made by someone who has authority. Consider the fact that I ask people in the hallways to take their hoods down. They believe that, yes, I do have that legal right, and that I'm there to enforce school policy, and so they generally take their hood down. In our government, authority comes from the Constitution. As far as where the Constitution's authority comes from, that would be the legitimacy. The Constitution provides the legitimacy in our government. Legitimacy means the right to make those decisions. Early decisions were questioned about legitimacy. There were many questions about how our government should be run throughout the course, particularly throughout the early course of our history. Keep in mind, though, the New Deal was questioned whether or not that was a legitimate activity. And today we have the question of judicial activism. As we've talked about, both liberal and conservative justices have been, and judges have been accused of being activist judges. Today, we also consider the fact that our government is legitimate because there is democracy throughout our entire country, which brings us to the question of what is democracy. Democracy literally means the rule of many. How exactly that's carried out, there are a couple of different ways. First of all, direct democracy. Here you see a picture of the classroom. You have citizens participating directly, actually making policy, and this usually in our country is a little bit smaller. So we have direct democracy about state issues. We have direct democracy about local issues such as school levies, etc., etc. We don't generally have direct democracy actually making the decision on a national level. You would not consider election of representatives as an example of direct democracy because they're not actually, when you elect a representative, you're making a decision, but you're not actually making the policy. When we elect our representatives, we have what is called representative democracy. This is the idea that leaders gain office and their power through competitive contest for the votes of the people. It is generally considered impractical for people to vote on absolutely everything when you consider the wide range of issues that occur within our government. I would not feel comfortable voting on everything from abortion to NASA funding and on down the line. There are lots of complicated issues, thus we elect representatives. There are problems with representative democracy. Representative democracy needs competition. In some areas of our country, there isn't a whole lot of competition between the Republicans and the Democrats. That competition actually might be between different Republicans and through the course of primaries. Representative democracy also needs free communication, which doesn't always happen. And another question in representative democracy is which offices should be appointed and which should be elected. Who should pay for campaigns is another big question. Keep in mind the presidential campaign of 2008 cost over $1 billion. And that maybe we should limit that funding, but if we do, are we the taxpayers willing to pay for these campaigns? There are places within our representative democracy where there is direct, as we mentioned. Those would be initiatives and referendums that people are actually voting to make decisions. The framers selected representative democracy for several reasons. First of all, they were concerned that the will of the people would not be the same thing as the public good, that people might not know literally what is best for them. Framers believed that the government should mediate public opinion, not mirror it. So it should not be the exact same, but rather it should use public opinion to determine what is best for the people. Representative democracy assumed that citizens did not have the time or knowledge to make good policy choices. Think back to the late 1700s when people had access to very little information, in contrast to now when we're inundated with information through a variety of medias. So the framers were concerned that people wouldn't have the time or knowledge to make good policy choices. They also liked representative democracy because it was slow. So often we hear people complain about how slow the government is. That was what the framers intended. If they intended it to be this slow, that's a different story. The framers thought that a slow process would be a good thing, because if things were done too quickly, it could do great damage. Great things could be done quickly, but great damage could also be done quickly. So they wanted to slow things down so that people would have the time to ponder and become educated on issues. Representative democracy, the framers also believed, would help to control tyranny, and that self-interested office holders would make sure to protect civil rights and civil liberties. Now that we've established that there is a representative democracy, we need to ask the question, who is it that has the most power in this representative democracy? I like to think of this as the president's telephone ringing. Who is it that he's going to take the call from? One theory is obviously the political elites, that certain groups have a disproportionate share of the power. Thus, we have the eagle soaring, looking down on everyone else. Our first theory is the Marxist theory, which states that power in the government is merely a reflection of the underlying economic forces, especially those concerned with the means of production. According to Marxist theory, all societies are divided into economic classes, usually boiling down to two classes that are really contending for power, which are the capitalists and the workers. It states that whichever class dominates the economy also will have control of the government. Thus, the government becomes nothing more than a vehicle to express and give legitimacy to the interests of the ruling class. In the U.S., a Marxist would probably contend that the government represents the rich and that it's held out, that power of the government then would be held on to by the rich, the bourgeoisie, if you will. When you look at this image, I want you to consider if the person who made it, according to Marxist theory, would fall under the capitalist label, or if they would fall under the workers label.